you shouldn't need to know as much as I'm having to need to know. I'll put it that way. This should be more accessible in every single way. The fact that I'm going to have to do this the way that I'm going to have to do this is insane. I am certainly going to be learning quite a bit. Alright. Okay. So I need something that implements poll. But I also, because it's a fused future, I had this up just a second ago. Let me duplicate this tab. And fused future. Okay. We also need is terminated. Which takes a borrow of the self, returns a bool, and to do, but that's probably always going to be false. So it helps to have context. And it's cursed how far we are right now, in the woods, away from what we're trying to do. Alright, so let me explain what I'm trying to do. Very briefly, so that it somewhat makes sense why I'm trying not to tear my beautiful hair out, making it work. It shouldn't be this hard. Okay. Alright. So, have you ever heard of WebSockets? I can explain this if you haven't. Alright, so WebSockets are a form of communication that you can use but don't have to on a website. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make this part of the screen live update when there's been a change on the server side. But I don't want a whole bunch of browsers having to knock on my server's door every 5 seconds and say, "Do you have new content?" That sounds terrible. That sounds wasteful. And that is currently what is implemented on my public website. So if we can avoid that, it's better, right? We should have the server know when there's a change and send a message to the browser over this WebSocket connection. So the web server needs to know when the file has changed. And when the file has changed, we need to send the latest version to the browser. All pretty sane. And we can check pretty aggressively every 100 milliseconds. Okay, 79% of it. That's not bad. Because it's very fast to have the server ask the operating system, "Hey, what's the last time that this file was written to?" That's pretty fast. That's because of caching, that's hardly ever even like having to hit disk. It's just asking the operating system for something it'll have in memory. That's very fast. So we can be kind of aggressive and check every 100 milliseconds. Be like, "Hey, operating system, has this file on disk been updated?" And the server does that without any network communications. So we've cut out the network communications, which were expensive and wasteful. And because the thing we're doing instead is so cheap, we can check frequently. which means when there is an update, there's less of a wait before we announce that update to all of the browsers that are watching. This shouldn't be crazy hard. I'm even doing this in kind of a lazy way, where each WebSocket has its own file watcher, which is wasteful, but again, less wasteful than what I'm currently doing on my website. Everything after that is where it goes to hell. So, yes, I am trying to fast the process. I'm trying to fast the process. So on my web server, this is the web server code. Alright? And in fact, this piece of web server code, this function, this only runs for the WebSocket connection. And it has one job, which is to proactively send a WebSocket message every time it detects a change to the underlying file. Here's the problem. It also needs to consume messages from the browser. Now you might think, Maddie, the browser isn't sending messages, and if it is, we don't care. This is entirely about the server sending things when the server knows that it's time to send things. And yes, god darn it, you are correct. Sorry for the mic bump. You are completely correct that we don't care, except that they'll build up if we don't, and that is the same mechanism that tells us when a client has disconnected. And the problem, the symptom I was seeing that started this whole nightmare was that when you're trying to shut down the server, the workflow that it seems to be doing is it sends a, hey, I'm shutting down message to all of the browsers, and it gives a bit of a grace period for the browsers horde all to RSVP and be like, okay, you're closing. I am terminating my connection. I respect that. I respect you, server. And you cannot process those close events without reading from the WebSocket stream, as if you were consuming a message from the browser. Like this is this line right here. There. This is the one that is like receiving a message from the browser. Alright. The reason we have this select construct, I didn't mean to type that. The reason we have that is because there are two different things that might happen that we need to process. Thing number one is file update. Thing number two is stream message. And we kind of have this third thing that's just a stupid technicality that took me a long time to figure out, where if you don't have any things you're waiting on that are ready, that there's like a fancy thing happening for my benefit for when this runs out of stuff. We say, okay, we're done. Shut down now. This is all happening in a loop. We do this over and over again. And it's just kind of whatever wins the race. Alright? That's select. Whatever wins the race. Oh, you should become a programmer. I recommend you program in a different language than this. This is making me embarrassingly angry. But a lot of these concepts are better implemented in other languages. I love asynchronous programming. I don't like it at all in Rust. But programming is fun, and it's rewarding, and you end up learning a lot about how the digital world works. You can kind of have an intuition when you're using someone else's app or whatever. You can say, oh, I know what's going on. I recognize this because I've been behind the scenes. Maybe not at your specific company, but I get the patterns. Your IQ is not that high. You'll try not to touch this thing. Yeah. JavaScript is... I sing its praises a lot. It gets a bad rap, but it's got good implementations in terms of speed and completeness. It's garbage collected, so you don't have to worry about memory management. That's taken off your shoulders. It's always going to be useful because that's what the browser uses, and a lot of stuff on the server side these days too. It's not a perfect language. It has its own issues, but it's got an asynchronous runtime as the base layer, so it does asynchronous stuff very well. You'll also... Aww. That means a lot to me. Well, I hope that I can make this stream a good experience. That's definitely the goal. It's meant to be educational for me and for the people watching. But yeah, JavaScript is good, Go is good, Erlang is good, all in kind of similar ways despite being very different languages because they are all garbage collected, reasonably high level languages built on top of an asynchronous runtime. And if you don't want to deal with asynchrony, I would recommend Python, because that's also high level and garbage collected. And it's got good constructs for generators and that kind of thing. So, Python is actually my favorite language. WebSockets are great. WebSockets are great. I remember when they were new. I'm older than I look. I look like I am in my early 20s. On some days I look even younger than that. But I'm in my early 30s. I've been in this industry for a while, and I remember when WebSockets were the new shit. And everyone was excited for this new feature that browsers were just starting to implement. It's like, oh, well, you know, if you've got a decent, up-to-date browser, you can make a simple chat application. That's always kind of like the hello world of WebSockets. Is you gotta make a chat application. You know, you're sending messages from the browser when when you've got a literal message to send. You hit enter and it posts, and that sends to the server. The server replicates that and sends it out as a message to all the other participants. And so you can see what everyone's saying, because the browser or the server is kind of acting as a relay that multiplies any message that comes in. I'm missing a word. I'm missing a word. Multiplexer? No, that's not it. Yeah, so browser chat is usually WebSockets or a similar technology. And WebSockets are very, very good for this. But there are older forms of chat than that are based on entirely different protocols. Like, probably the earliest was IRC. And actually the first job I ever worked. This is before Slack. This was before Microsoft Teams or whatever. Never had to use that, thankfully. I've not heard good things. But back in the day, I was remote working. I have for my entire career. And we used IRC on a private IRC server. And it was all text-based. It was in a terminal like this. I'm editing code in a terminal, but terminals are very flexible. And we had this IRC client called IRSSI, and we would use that to talk to each other in real time. So that's probably the oldest that I've used. But growing up, there was also a lot of XMPP, which used to be like really, really popular for like Yahoo chat was based on this, and Google chat was based on this, and Facebook chat was based on this. And you could actually connect between the different organizations. It was federated. So you could talk to someone on Facebook from your like MSN account or whatever, or your Yahoo account. Everyone could talk to each other. Both IRC and XMPP were federated. And it was a great model, but it was too good for users, and it didn't lock them in enough. And this is where all of these capitalist evil website corporations were like, we can't squeeze you for dollars if you have this much free mobility to go use a different service and still talk to all of your old friends. And that's why you don't see IRC, or especially XMPP, in a lot of use anymore. It's because it was too user positive and didn't allow enough exploitation. And so all of these companies that actually grew their user base by supporting these open federated protocols, once they had users, they started disabling their servers for XMPP. It's utter bastardry. Aww, you can call me ma'am if you want. Yeah, cross-platform messaging was very cool. It was in certain senses a golden age. I have nostalgia for the way the internet used to work in that regard. There's a lot of new stuff that I like too. I'm not completely old lady shouts at cloud, but I can be sometimes. Omegle was based on WebSocket. I bet. Do I dare go on Omegle and check while I'm on stream? I shouldn't, because you never know. You never know what's on there. I shouldn't take that kind of risk. But I'd be willing to bet that Omegle is either based on WebSockets, most likely, but actually, hold on. There is video. It's probably going to be based on WebRTC, which is very WebSockety, but it's better for multimedia. And the RTC stands for real-time communication. So WebRTC is very good for like video calls, audio calls, that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure it's the basis for, like, if you use Google Meet at work, that's WebRTC. Cross-platform messaging is great for the consumer. And it will never not be great for the consumer. And we're actually starting to see some nods at federation coming back again. Like, I don't know if you're on Blue Sky. It's this social media app thing that, I've never gotten too much into it, but I have an account. I just say random garbage on there sometimes. I don't care about it enough to be a normal person on Blue Sky. So I say weird things, and it feels very much like firing gunshots into the air to keep the rent low. Alright, so Blue Sky does not have any other hosts other than the people who are making it. And I think it's like a subdivision of Facebook, or there's like some major social media place where Blue Sky is kind of their small project. And in order to get people to come over, they're like, yeah, the Federation's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. It'll get there eventually. But it's gonna be there. It's gonna be there. And just saying that it's gonna be there has brought in a lot of people. And I'm kind of at the point where I will believe in other people's ability to host interoperating Blue Sky servers when I freaking see it. Not a minute before. Because the incentive there is to make big promises, get a bunch of people, and then say, oh, it's too hard, and not actually allow for people to talk to Blue Sky. It makes too much sense. Because they have to deal with moderation, for one thing. Let's say that you're in your little gated community Blue Sky server, but a bunch of trolls from some other Blue Sky server come over and like start harassing you. You need to have some sort of like mechanisms in the protocol to deal with that. And a lot of these older protocols had primitive mechanisms that was still good enough because the crowds weren't big enough and they grew slow enough. Have you ever heard the term eternal September? We're very off topic now, but I don't mind. Alright, so this, as will become obvious, is a term that comes from universities. And it's no surprise, because back in the day that was pretty much the only place where you'd have access to the internet. Before it was really a big consumer thing that everyone used, it was a network between universities. And the thing about universities is that they have a seasonal schedule. So every fall, or autumn if you're not US American, and autumn is a nice word and it's less ambiguous. So even as an American, I gotta be like, okay, autumn's a nice word. But every fall, because I'm American, eternal September. So, at the start of the school year, in September, you'd have a temporary influx of students who were not really accustomed to the cultural norms, and just kind of like, there's so many people that don't really know what they're doing and have kind of outsider standards of decorum. And over the course of the year, a lot of people would kind of get with the program, or they'd drop out, or something. And you'd have a slow restoration of the university culture, for good and for ill. But a lot of it was about politeness and respect. So, over time, you'd recover from this rush of students in the school year. And, you'd have, sometimes someone would transfer over, and this one person, like in a sea of other people who are already culturally adjusted, this one new person would be like, oh, I better adjust to the people around me. And then the group gets bigger, still homogenous in these cultural values. Eternal September is the term for what happened when the internet got popular. And the reason why it's called that is because that rush of new people that could not possibly be tamed fast enough to be kind of polite, decorous citizens of the internet, it never stopped. It never stopped being like that. It was just, from now on, there's always going to be too many new random people who have no incentive to align themselves with, the rules that have to exist for a large crowd of internet users to have mutual politeness and respect. And most of these people are anonymous anyways. And if you get banned, you can just make a new account. And so any kind of moderation, any kind of culture absorption, just can't stand up to the influx of new people who aren't interested. They just want to do what they want to do. And that's been the internet for so long that it's weird to think of it as any other way at this point. We've been in the eternal September since the 90s. Yeah, because it is the university experience of September, but it never ends. The name itself is very much a time capsule. It's an antiquated name because this has been the internet, like the internet's nature, for far longer than the internet has worked any other way. So it's kind of weird that this sort of niche in history, this niche in history ended up naming the way the rest of internet history is described. In fact, you won't hear that term very often anymore. Because just, it feels weird to say now. So, I remember why I was saying that. It's because a lot of these early federated protocols in this golden age of federated protocols, Thank you. Aww. Yeah. A lot of those protocols had very simple moderation tools, but it was good enough. Because it was prior to the endless onslaught, the eternal September. The truth is, those places have in some ways gotten healthier in the last couple years. You want to know why? You can probably guess. It's because nobody uses IRC anymore. Nobody uses XMPP anymore. The crowds have once again become small enough that it's a community instead of like a global mob. There's just a bit of concern about whether that is going to go too far at some point, because some of these some of these really major IRC in particular, because a lot of IRC was always hobbyist run rather than company run. Like irc.freenode.net was huge basically my entire life. But it's shrunk. You are correct. And it's a long time for an internet service, even one run in good faith, to stay well maintained. And I wish I could remember the details, but a couple of years ago I remember reading about, like, there was a bit of a crisis for hosting for Freenode. And it was really alarming to a lot of people. So I would say, as protocols, these things are never going to completely disappear. Because the software to run a server is open source, and the software to run a client is open source. So if you want to have an IRC or an XMPP server that you host and you use for your friends or something, no one can stop you, and no one's been able to for a very long time. So it's always going to somewhat exist because the barriers to doing it are very low. That is a bit different from talking about long-term interconnected communities, which is what these things are usually about. All right, you'll have channels on these major IRC servers that are based on, like some specific interest, like the Stargate channel for fans of the Stargate franchise. And it'll be more of a niche thing. It'll be smaller numbers. It's unlikely to ever go to zero because it's too easy for people to run these things. But it's also a matter of interest when you have all these other places that people can go. And right now, a lot of that, like, in a lot of ways, and it's not ideal, but in a lot of ways, Discord is a spiritual successor to IRC and XMPP. And the main problem with that is that Discord is this private company that doesn't care about you and doesn't want you to be able to host your own Discord server. In fact, what they call a Discord server, and they say that it's yours, but it's actually just a partition within their service. You can't run a Discord server on your own computer. And so they've appropriated this terminology, but they are not using it correctly, And that's a choice. That's intentional. They want this to be a proprietary service. That will always be a proprietary service, where they can change the rules on you after you're locked in. But they want to have the veneer of friendliness and self-ownership. Yeah. Basically, it's yours until they, for any reason, decide they don't like what you're doing, or they can extract an extra dollar from you. Whatever feature you like most might be the next feature to be paywalled behind Discord Nitro. That is always the nature of the deal. That is always the nature of the deal on any proprietary service. And it's not too bad if it's just a proprietary hosting of an open source protocol. For example, I host my code on GitHub. Let me full screen this. Alright, this is a project that I've been tinkering with, and it's not what I'm working on today. It's not what I'm working on today, but I'm hosting this publicly, and I'm not paying to host it. This is when I download this and a server has to do some computation and network stuff somewhere in the world. That money is coming partly from venture capitalist investors and partly coming from people paying for services like GitHub Enterprise. But the part of this that's the most important and fundamental is there's a protocol called Git. And I can host a Git server anywhere I goddamn want. I might not have all the extra features of GitHub, but the core, being able to store code and get the latest version and stuff like that, it's open source, and there's nothing github.com can do to prevent me from packing up my ball and going home if I choose to. Because they don't own the Git protocol. It predates GitHub. GitHub is named after Git, not the other way around. Believe it or not, Git was actually written originally by Linus Torvalds to be the source control software for the Linux kernel. And it still is today. Although Linus, to my understanding, rarely pays any attention to development of Git. Yeah, so I'm in the lead here. If GitHub decides that they want to remove my software, they can, but I have all my own copies, and Git is open source, and I can stand up a Git server on my desktop computer. It's, I don't know, maybe 4 feet away from me. And no one can stop me. And I can decide I don't like GitHub if they make some awful decision, which they might because they're pushing Copilot pretty hard, and I have AI skepticism. Deeply. Not uninformed, just, you know. There's a lot of problems with it that are not my cup of tea. And if GitHub pushes Copilot too hard, I might say, it's in my best interest to just proactively do my own hosting. And even if I want something that's more than just plain Git, there's a bunch of open source software for running a web service around Git. GitHub is not the only game in town, and they can't be. Yes, I am in control here. If they mess with me, they can mess with me, but it can only really ever be temporary, because I have my own copies of everything. I'm not nervous. I'm having a good time. It's just a little cold in here. And my voice wavers a little bit. And I'm like, Yeah. I'm having a good time. It's probably not a coincidence that I'm having a good time now that I'm taking a bit of a break from programming in Rust. Oh! I just now noticed. Okay, so every day I stream from 10 to 2 p.m. Pacific. It's 2:20. I got super sucked into this. So I do need to get off stream pretty soon because I need to have a little recovery time and a little time with my primary partner before I go spend the evening and all through a bit of tomorrow with one of my other partners. I'm polyamorous. It's a good deal if you're with other people who are on the same page, but I would definitely say be careful about people who are new to the poly scene and have only ever been in like monogamous kind of world, because you have to unlearn a lot of stuff if you're coming from a monogamous context. Aww. I enjoyed streaming. At least once you came on. Like that's when it really got good for me. Because up until this point I've been like fucking compiler. Oh, my name is Maddie. It's in my channel name. Yeah, I go by the screen name Maddie M4 most places. I accidentally squatted it with a different Twitch account and couldn't get into it. So that's why this is Maddie M4 Codes. Completely self-inflicted. But, yeah. Maddie. M-A-D-D-I-E. Alright. Well, I do have to get offline like I was saying, but I really hope you come back, because this is such a good time. It's okay. It's okay. It really is. Thank you very much. This is maybe my favorite stream that I've done in a while. And yesterday I did a stream where I was wearing this absolute crazy makeup. I'll have to hold on. I'll send you a clip that I made of it, because I put clips on my YouTube channel. Give me a second, because I would love for you to see the makeup look that I did, because it was wild. It was wild. Shorts. Okay, that's what it was. Alright, that's why I was having trouble. Get shareable link, and... Alright. Okay! Yeah. Same time every weekday except for Thursdays. So, 10 to 2 Pacific, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I might have to start streaming on Thursdays just to not throw myself explaining the schedule. Alright. Cool. Have a good day.